Welcome to Littleton Live. I'm your host, Nicole Biagioni. The objective of this program is to have discussions about topics that affect us here in Littleton. We welcome your calls each week and look forward to having a meaningful dialogue with you about specific topics that we will discuss. Tonight, our topic is, should the legal voting age be lowered to age 16? We want to hear your opinions on this topic. If you would like to be a part of the discussion, give us a call at 978-540-2487. If you call and are put on the air, please turn down your TV set because there's a slight delay in what you're seeing in the direct phone line to the studio. Also, if you get a busy signal or a recorded message, please hang up and try again later. So, the phone lines are open. While we wait for our first call, let me welcome to the studio a panel of young students who will offer their opinions on this topic. Welcome, guys, and thank you so much for being with me. Can you just introduce yourself and give me your age?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Michael St. Germain. I'm a sophomore at Littleton High School. I'm 15 years of age, and it's a pleasure being with you tonight.
Hi, my name is Gianna Biagioni. I am a sophomore at Essex Agricultural and Technical School, and I am 16 years old, and it's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Well, thank you, guys. So obviously you know why you're here, and this has been a hot button issue for, I believe, since March 6th of 2019. Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley introduced some legislation considering lowering the federal voting age to 16. So what do you guys think on that? Do you want the voting age to be lowered?
If I had to say, the idea of the idea of lowering the voting age, I would say, it is interesting to see a lot more power in the in people of my age, I suppose. Yet again, there's still a lot of people my age that don't have exactly the greatest civics education, so it might be frightening to see that sort of choice being thrust on people who don't necessarily know exactly what they mean or what they want to say about this country.
And I agree with Michael there. I don't really think the voting age should be lowered. I agree that it should stay at 18 years old because, again, going on with what Michael said, you don't see a lot of 16-year-olds who know a lot about politics. And it depends on what home setting you're in and what you're exposed to, because some parents feed their political views to their children, and so they're not allowed to make their own views their own and be able to explore politics until they're at an older age.
Okay, so I feel students have taken an activist role in society today, and they feel like they need to be represented now. So where do we draw the line when it comes to who is considered an adult? Like, once you're able to vote, you're considered an adult, and now 16-year-olds are being more vocal in our government. So do you think we should lower the age so then they can be represented and have a voice and elect representatives that will represent them in Washington?
Well, at the age of 16, there are many things you can do that almost mark yourself as an adult, like the ability to pay taxes, get a job, or be prosecuted in court as an adult. However, some of these ages, the general consensus for being an adult I would generally be saying 18. As in, drinking age would also be 21, and other sorts like that, I would say.
And you don't have to be considered an adult to kind of be an activist in your community, even though voting is a big part to pay back to your country and voice your opinion in a way. You can do other things to see a change in your community, like either coming on a show like this one and voicing your opinion, or talking to your local town officials to see if there's any changes you could do to get the end results that you want to see.
Okay, so traditionally, young Americans between the ages of 18 to 29, so that's millennials and now the beginnings of Gen Zers, have a lower voter turnout compared to older Americans, typically 65 and above. So the Young American cohort in the 2016 election had 46.1% of voter turnout. So the other half, the 64, if I did my math right. Not sure, not a math major. Those eligible voters didn't come out to vote. So that was a really low turnout, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So I guess, how do you respond to that type of statistic where only 46.1% of that age demographic came out to vote?
I guess it's peculiar because as something so important to the future, and as you said, with generations wanting to be heard, like much younger demographics, I suppose it would be a lot more important to voice your opinion and to see that actually the majority of people of that age aren't voting. I would say it's rather shocking.
And it's kind of almost not as much of a disappointment, but it's kind of sad because you see them saying, I want to do this, I want to see this change. And when that opportunity is presented to themselves, they would rather be sleeping or watching Netflix and not going out like for 10, 15 minutes, going to vote and then coming back to their home. It's kind of, like Michael said, startling because you'd think that all these activists and people who are ready to do something or seem ready just don't have the motivation or the effort to actually go and make a change.
Yeah, and those were stats in 2016, and that was during the general election. And I kind of feel like push comes to shove, if we use that phrase, where if you complain about you don't have representation in Washington, D.C., and you don't go vote, then you're not going to have that representation. So it's just, actions have consequences. So first and foremost, if you'd like to give your opinion about this, give us a call at 978-540-2487. I'd love to hear from you. Are you for or against it? Call in. So what do you think about people not voting in general? I mean, we kind of touched on it last time with younger people, but you'll see adults too in their later years saying, oh, I don't want to vote, or it's just too much. Or how do you respond to people saying, like, I don't vote?
I'm not sure. I guess you'd really want to, in a very common quote, be the change you want to see in the world. Because if you're really trying to push, I suppose, your agenda or beliefs, then voting is a very effective and almost easy way of doing it, that I would say.
And as a proud American, I really see voting as a way to participate in your community and in your country. And it's kind of a natural right that you have to go and, in a way, give your opinion to the members in Washington or in your local representatives. And I kind of just see it's a little bit sad when granted, when you get older and you don't have as much energy to do things, it's not as much of a quote unquote important way to go out and give your voice, but it kind of just makes me sad that they're just kind of giving away their voice, for lack of phrase.
Yeah, and we take it for granted here that other countries, for example, in the United Arab Emirates, their voting age is 25, which is very high. And technically speaking, it's more so that the brain is fully developed at age 25. So that kind of makes sense. Whereas when you look at Scotland, they just lowered their voting age to 16 after independent referendum in 2014. So you kind of look to see what ages are what. And most of the countries in the world have a voting age of 18. So what difference do you think it would make for 16-year-olds to be able to vote?
What I would believe is that, I know I went on saying that a lot of 16-year-olds would be unable because of lack of knowledge or not motivated, but I do believe there's also a positive side to it, as in promoting a better civics education or people getting more interested in politics of a younger age like myself. That way I think that people could definitely make much more of a change in that way.
So you think that with school that they should have a government class? Because I remember from high school, I had a civics class, but it was one class and it couldn't fit into my schedule. And it was more so just a class that you could take to opt out of anything. It didn't seem like a class that was pushed for. So how do you think schools can promote you doing your civic duty if it's that important?
So even actually in this year, I'm taking a U.S. government class, and I'm really excited because I'll be able to learn more about like the government and how everything works, because not having that full insight in middle school or even freshman year, it's really important for me and hopefully for other students taking that course to understand how the government works. So instead of making ignorant claims of not really knowing anything, you can have the information and you can know what you're saying and have the correct facts to back your opinion.
Okay. So why do you think the oldest in, why do you think there's such a difference between an older generation voting, like the gap I was talking about, where there's 46.1% of young people voted, but there's a large majority of older people voting, about 70.9% of older people above the age of 65 voting. Why do you think there's a big discrepancy?
If I had to say, it might be, as G touched on earlier, perhaps lack of motivation. People might not just be seeing, I suppose, the importance of voicing their opinion, as perchance maybe the older generations might be seeing that as maybe a bit more important. It's hard to generalize these sort of things because I know there are people like John and I's age that would really like to commit, well, as soon as possible. However, with an older age, I could definitely see it becoming more of a sort of thing that would be pushed for.
And just kind of from what our parents have talked about in the house, it's kind of like the morals that they were raised with, like it's your civic duty and a privilege to go and vote for your country or your town. And so I feel like as time has progressed, those morals have like taken a looser rein, so to say, where they're not really pushed for in younger generations, but as we see in our parents and grandparents, that those were something that they were raised like very strongly with.
Do you think that plays into the, Michael, you mentioned earlier that that it's people don't have motivation, younger people. So do you think that plays into the stereotype that, oh, younger kids are lazy and they're not motivated? And then you see teens say, oh, but I'm not that. I don't want to live into the stereotype. When you just mentioned that's probably one of the reasons why. So I don't know.
It could. What I would see is that I don't necessarily, it would be a conscious choice of saying, I'm not willing to commit to this sort of thing. Perhaps it would just be other occupations or things that they would think would be higher up on their needs to do, like getting better grades in school and other extracurricular activities. There's so much going on at that age that voting itself could just seem like this sort of concept of committing rather than almost a necessity, as John was saying earlier.
Almost like a chore in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that the high school kind of has the humanitarian club and the community service requirements. So do you think that having those requirements would motivate kids to, I don't know, kind of get them to vote, being like, oh, my civic duty to give back to the community also, would that be a link to also voting?
I could see how a connection like that would be made, but a lot of kids, or at least my peers, sort of see a community service as, unfortunately, as I hate to say this, almost a chore, a requirement, an obligation, a thing, rip off the Band-Aid, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And as you get into high school, those hours start to like get higher, because I believe for Littleton High School that you need 50 hours of community service to not qualify, but go towards your graduation. And I'm not sure what it is at my school, but I've definitely seen with some of my peers that unless it's something you're enjoying, like I'm a part of 4-H, so we do a lot of community service work, and it's something that I enjoy, that I really love to do and take part in. But if it's like mandatory for school and I can't find an activity that I love, then I'm just gonna see it as something that's another bother. And I really hate to say that, because community service can do so many good things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you just see it as a chore. So would kids seeing age 16 see it as a chore? Like, oh, I have to go vote today. Like, oh, that seems like.
I could definitely see that being a possibility.
It's kind of like being dragged to church in some instances, like your parents make you go, and you can't really appreciate that until you're older and you understand more about what's going on.
So, as 15 and 16-year-olds, what are you focused on in your lives right now?
I would suppose bettering myself to an education, working on at least sort of what I would like to work on in the future, I would say. I suppose politics hasn't been a thing that I picked up on until recently, But like I said, there are a lot of kids my age or around that haven't really been that interested due to other commitments, I suppose, like academics or social life even, and perchance even other commitments outside of school, like a sport or things like that.
And kind of branching off of what Michael said, you really just, for me, it's kind of, you don't know what's going on. And because as a sophomore in high school, you don't know what like college you're going to be committed to or what major you want to go in. And as I'm in a tech school, I've kind of like started the funnel a little bit earlier than other students. But even though once I am more mature in my sense of political understanding and U.S. government, I would want to vote. Currently, as a 16-year-old still in high school, my priorities are my education and what I want to do in my future.
That kind of leads me into my next question, your priorities. So if your priorities are getting good grades, being in sports, extracurriculars, looking at colleges, like you're just focused on those little things, and how would you focus on the national things as well? Because you're already juggling this. So now adding the topic of voting, like are you going to understand national politics with all the other stuff you have on?
Okay, so I can start. It just really depends on, for me, what environment you grew up in and like how your parents explain it to you or like what news stations you watch. Because as we all know, a bunch of them are biased. But it's your job just to go and find a news station that, or even like a newspaper that you think is a credible source, and just start reading and see what you can find, and then just kind of expand upon that.
With, like you said, with balancing all those other things, I suppose you could say, off of that stereotype that a lot of kids would be having other stuff to do, voting almost seems, in the scale of things, like the rest of your life, almost isn't just a thing that needs to happen, when in reality it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, so I feel that it needs to be a bigger thing instead of one little thing that you push off later, but then once you turn 18, that's a priority.
Absolutely. And I think having the voting age at 18, once you've sort of, like we were saying, reached that age of maturity, that could be a thing that would be much more normalized rather than...
Yeah, so let's kind of jump to maturity. Thank you for giving me my next segue. So with maturity, our generation, because we're kind of in the same group, is known for many things, as eating Tide Pods and eating a spoonful of cinnamon. And they're not the smartest decisions. And on top of that, like I said before, our brains aren't fully developed until age 25. So how do you respond to someone saying, oh, you're not mature enough, you can't vote?
I wouldn't like to say that that statement doesn't have complete merit. Like, it's common in society that the age is 21, and while our brains are still maturing, a common point that's brought up is that the way teenagers' minds work is that a lot of our choices, when they're sort of, well, a lot of our choices can be based a little bit more on emotion rather than just standard facts, I suppose. And with these sort of things going on, rather than being maybe biases, even if like a social stigma could be like beliefs fed you by your parents, beliefs fed you by your upbringing, beliefs by your friends, all sorts of things. Maturity can be a big thing, and especially at our age, it kind of seems a bit of a daunting thing.
Yeah, I feel teenagers they don't think rationally. I mean, I'm still 19, I'm a teenager, but they're not thought out, rational words. You know the consequences of your actions. So say, for example, someone voted, say if we let 16-year-olds vote, are they going to understand like say if you guys are able to vote, do you think you're going to understand voting at a national level? Say you have two candidates and they highlight points that you like, but are you going to understand some of the stuff that's in the background that's more of an adult issue?
I think if the adult issues could really be raised, I'd do my best to understand them, at least as far as I could. Like, as we were bringing up earlier, at our age, it's a bit odd to really wrap our whole heads around the government system and civics education. But yeah, I would say that could be a precedent.
And I really, going back to the maturity thing, as 16-year-olds, again, our brains aren't fully developed. We're more emotional than logical. I think as we're watching those national debates for whatever reason, some of those deeper, more kind of adult scenario talking points would just kind of like, whoop, go right over our heads because we're not at that age where we're going to understand about, like, fully about, like, taxes and all this other not mushed up, but like big collection or like a basket of themes that we're just not ready to take in.
Yeah. So first and foremost, if you'd like to voice your opinion, give us a call at 978-540-2487. I want to hear from you, the citizens watching at home. I mean, if you let your 16-year-old high schooler vote, what's the outcome of that? So I actually want to get back to the point you were going to say when you were talking about, oh, it's a basket of mush of, I don't know how to do my taxes. I don't know how I'm gonna pay my tuition. I mean,
I'm gonna pay a mortgage.
How am I gonna pay a mortgage?
Yeah.
I don't know half the stuff of how to pay. Like, taxes are scary, and I only know I do my income tax return before Patriots Day in Massachusetts. That's literally all I know. So I feel kind of relating schools back to it. Should schools be educating, have courses that teach you about these things, so then it eases you into adulthood, so once you reach age 18 you're a little more mature to vote?
And yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, going back to my school again, for sophomore year, we have a U.S. government course and a financial literacy course. So I feel those are two great classes that students can take so then they can be more prepared in the future. Because as a technical school, they're trying to prepare kids for life and a future ahead where they can maintain a job or be an owner of their own business, or either promote them to go into college or just going straight out into the workforce. So if even more academic-based schools have more classes like that, I feel like it would just be better for the general teenage populace.
And it's a common, I suppose, social belief, at least in my school, that a lot of, I think in school in general, that a lot of classes, the knowledge that's often necessary for adulthood, like you said, taxes, mortgages, paying off, going into the workforce, which are really looking to do with their lives, some of that stuff can almost not be really brought up in a high school education. And I definitely believe that an effort should be made in making those classes a lot more available, but also preparing for college education with the necessary classes would also be difficult because, like you said, fitting in those classes in a schedule would be quite difficult.
Yeah, so kind of sticking with a school theme, with elections, do you guys take your school elections seriously? So with like voting for president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, do you take those seriously?
I do my best to. I would say it's sort of hard because at the base level, what a lot of them contribute to is fundraising and a lot of decisions in that, but what I would say there is that I try my best to take them seriously. However, sometimes with more formal elections, you get to see a lot more of behind their motives, backstory. But with here, you get to, I suppose, there's always a speech at my school, and you can hear their promises. They almost seem cookie cutter, I suppose you could say. But I do my best to take them seriously, even if they don't hold quite as much merit as the serious ones.
And kind of in high school, it's kind of following that stereotypical like rom-com movie of like American high schools, but it's kind of like a popularity race in a sense, where at my school it's like a very large amount of students, so it's kind of hard to take it seriously if we don't even have like class elections where we get to hear the speeches of the candidates. So if you're not hearing what their propositions or their promises are going to be, how can you take it seriously if you don't even know what they're going to provide for you as a student?
So if students in high school who are ages 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 aren't really taking that vote seriously, then how can we trust them to vote in either municipal elections, which are like town elections, or in the national level? Because if they're not going to take this basic one, which I mean, you're just deciding who's going to control the funds for your prom and graduation gift, and if you don't take those seriously, how can adults and also the rest of society trust you with your vote?
I suppose, not to fling off the point, but I understand that there's a certain level of seriousness. But like you said, there isn't much dividing that without a lot of backstory or information that a lot of the votes, if they would decide to vote, could really not be taken as seriously as they should have been, as they should be.
And I know I'm kind of like throwing myself into the pit in here, but if you can't even take your school election seriously, as like the American population, I wouldn't trust you with municipal or national elections, because if you can't take the gravity of a high school class election, then how can you take the physical weight and importance of a national election?
So yeah, it's kind of how can we trust you if, and it goes back to maturity. Are you going to be mature enough to check off that ballot box, knowing the consequences of your actions? Because say if, I'm always concerned if, say, if a 16-year-old votes for XYZ, but don't know that XYZ is harmful to some aspects of society, then it's kind of, what do you do now with that? So I'm going to switch gears again. So there has been talks, and I guess I saw this from a Wicked Local article, it was from Wicked Local Waltham, that they are in Concord, Carlisle, there's 2 teens proposing that they want to lower the voting age to 17 for municipal elections. So I guess, would that be a way to curb the not voting, the stereotype that young people don't vote? Would that be a way to start good habits of, oh, if I go vote, then it's going to carry on for a lifetime?
I actually quite like that idea personally, but because it sort of provides almost an entryway to the idea of your votes counting a lot more than who's going to organize a fundraiser in your grade. Because it's like a segue, and I presume 18 would be kept for national elections, correct? Okay. So with that, yeah, I feel as if that would be I feel like that would be a positive idea, at least in my opinion.
And I really like that idea too, because like 17, and if you don't agree with the 16 age, is a lot less scarier number in a sense than 16. They're like, okay, they're right in between that 16, 18 range to like adulthood, and then still kind of like a goofy teenager. And I feel voting in those municipal elections kind of gives them a good taste about what they're going to be like, not thrown into, but like placed into when they become 18 and they are registered to vote. So I think it might not work for every town, but I think it's a good way to like kind of start those healthy habits.
Yeah. So Littleton, do you think that we should start a program where we have 16 or 17-year-olds vote in municipal elections? Give us a call at 978-540-2487. This is a big topic and it might affect you, so give us a call. I definitely think it would, just switching back, I think that would be, you'd start good habits like when you teach your kids, oh, eat veggies, eat like proteins. Like I feel you could also work that, oh, go vote. So then we can kind of outright that statistic that, oh, only 46.1% of teens, but like young adults between the ages of 18 to 29 voted in the 2016 election. Like that will, maybe we can reverse that. And I know there's been advocate groups that have said that, oh, like they're trying to get kids out to vote. I know at college, I mean, you guys are in high school still, but at college I'd have people come into my classroom and be like, have you registered to vote? You should register to vote. And I mean, it got annoying after a while after I sent my absentee ballot. After the second time someone came in, said, have you registered to vote? So I feel, is there like an over-activism to having kids register to vote, or is it just, or is it just getting kids to vote?
I would say more getting kids to vote, at least in the way that you said, with like almost a healthy upbringing with like a sort of positive culmination, instead of, it appears, grilling people whether or not they've assigned a vote. Because therefore, if you do it almost like that, it'd be almost a negative association with people just, have you voted yet? Have you voted yet? As opposed to, this is something that you should really do that's important for your future.
And I feel like the activism's important, but no matter how much like promoting you do or going into classrooms, it's really up into the hands of the potential voter, because if they keep coming and coming and coming to your class, and you don't have to go register to vote. Like, you could just either ignore them or you could actually think about what they're trying to speak to you. But no matter how much activism is done, it's ultimately in the person's hands.
So you're giving more responsibility to kids. Do you think they can handle that responsibility? I mean, they already, like we said before, they already have XYZ going on in their small little world. Do you think they're going to be able to handle that responsibility?
And then it kind of goes back to the maturity thing. It just depends on like where their like maturity level's at. Like at most 16-year-olds, personally, I don't believe I don't believe I could handle like work, school, grades, extracurriculars, and then the thought of having to watch and go to all these like either town meetings and watching these debates so then I can be ready to make the proper decision if I went in to vote.
Like I've said, this decision is incredibly weighty, and it seems like Gianna said, it would be a very big decision, and although some people don't consider it that, it's a lot about representing yourself, that decision. By kids, I guess, it's almost like the notion of, like you said with earlier on, Ju, with the older citizens, that it was more of an idea of morals, whether or not, instead of just hinting as if this is a thing that you'll do when you're grown up.
So are you like suggesting that we kind of need to, I'm trying to think of how I can word this. So should parents have a more big role in telling people, or their children, that they need to go vote and be influencers? Like, is that what you were trying to get at?
I suppose, yes. With voting, that's definitely something I would go for.
Yeah. I guess you also talked about the like levity of the situation when it comes to voting. How can you get your peers to realize, it's not a joke, like in high school, it's the real deal that has consequences? Like, how do you think of ideas to, I guess, convince not convince, but like, how can you let them know that this is not just a joke?
In that sense, it's kind of hard because, again, it like all leads back to the maturity, because no matter how much you say this is serious, this is your future, what you decide is going to have an impact. You never really kind of understand the gravity until you're in that situation. Like, I could go up to my peers saying, hey guys, voting's really important. You should consider registering when you're 18. And they could be like, okay, Gianna, we'll think about it. Or then some of them could be like, nah, it's fine. I'm not going to worry about that until I'm 18. So it just is, again, like you can only do so much.
I guess, what do you say to U.S. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who's proposed this, of that 16-year-olds should be able to vote? Like, if she was watching right now, what would you want her to say? Like, what would you want to say to her? There we go.
I would say to her, go back and remember when you were 16 and think, were you ready to vote? Because everyone's different, but think about it personally. Because if you weren't ready, then think of like the general populace of 16-year-old Americans. Are they ready?
I would personally say, off of that, with the whole preparation, if 16-year-olds would receive like almost more info into almost a civics education, just as long as 16-year-olds had a better understanding, or at least provided a better understanding to the younger demographic, then I think that could be a plausible choice. However, in the meantime, where this is such a big decision and a lot of it goes unannounced, like you said, the whole 46%, for now, I would say we should keep it later.
All right, so not change the voting age. I kind of want to go back to that municipal voting scenario. So next year in 2020, not only the town of Littleton has 4 elections coming up, which is a lot. So we have an election in March, and then which is the primaries, and then we have a town election, and then we have in September, we have another primary, and then we have the general election. So I know we can't miracle having I know we can't exactly miracle having 17-year-olds being able to vote, but do you think that would be a good time to start, or do you think students should advocate at maybe a town meeting that we should bring this up if if we thought this was a good idea, which you guys said, oh, I kind of like that idea. So
And this is for like 17-year-olds going to vote?
16 to 17, because also in Somerville as well, they're thinking about having 16-year-olds vote, and Concord Carlisle is kind of leading towards 17.
Personally, I think we shouldn't like throw high schoolers in immediately, be like, it's 2020, go vote, go, go. Like,
Yeah.
maybe we like kind of play with it for a few years before we just kind of just push them in.
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially on a year with as much weight, like you said, as this, as being almost introduced into voting, and then with 4 town elections. I know it seems hypocritical of me to say to introduce it at a later time where there doesn't seem to be as much,
Yeah.
because then again, later on in life, you're probably going to have to deal with that many elections.
Yes.
However, for beginners, beginners. For people that are being more recently introduced, I would say, for now, we should probably wait until a less tense time.
We ease off the gas, we don't just floor it.
So, I mean, I feel that also, do you think, and this is, oh no, do you think by politicians pushing legislation saying that younger generations should be able to vote, do you think that's giving them a bigger voter pool for them to get reelected? Like, I don't know, I feel like that's an angle we should talk about.
I suppose. I could see how there could be a bit of, like, almost insinuating
Yeah, it's like an
by-
evil motive.
Yeah.
behind that sort of idea where you would try to get support by giving a voice to these sort of people. However, it's a really tough sort of thing to say because who knows, maybe these people would really like to see a change and be more represented, but also behind their motives, they could also like to see themselves being represented by these younger people.
Yeah, they want a bigger voter demographic to get at.
You've thrown us a dicey question, Nicole. Like, you, again, going back to like the 16-year-old like pool of Americans, you don't know if they're educated or if they're not, because one politician could try, like, sadly I'm going to say this, could try to manipulate that lower demographics to say, okay, if I tell them this, then they're going to go to the polls, check off my name, and bam, I'm back in my seat. So it's kind of like it's like a blind shoot. You don't know what they're gonna do, and you don't know what the younger voters are gonna do.
Yeah, it's a dicey and controversial question. I wanted to
Absolutely.
It's like,
I wanted
Almost
to.
like, sorry about that.
it's
Yeah.
Almost like I
okay.
said earlier, with it being almost a pressure by your peers
Yes.
or by your parents, as odd as this sounds, because you don't necessarily have connections with these people, it could also be a pressure by politicians as well.
yes. There's just a lot of pressure.
Do you? I guess going to health class. Do you think peer pressure is okay for voting? Because I mean, we say peer pressure is bad for drinking and smoking and doing drugs. So do you think like peer pressure? I mean, I feel like peer pressure, go vote. I mean, yeah, that could be a good thing. But can you also do you think that's also a bad thing?
I could see how peer pressuring almost into choices. I would say peer pressuring into voting would be more positive.
Yeah.
But like having a conversation like this now, like the ethics and why or how you should be more comfortable with voting. But then again, it's like John said, it's really in the eye of the beholder on who you'd like to vote for. And what your friend says, although their ideas may have merit, it's generally up to you.
And like, I kind of agree with Michael, but I'm just gonna say this now, like, your friends don't give you your opinion. You give yourself your own opinion. And like, I feel in this instance that the peer pressure is good. Like, go vote. Like, be a part of the American generation that does what they want. Doesn't do what they want, but like helps to form their future that they want to see. But the peer pressure shouldn't be targeted towards their political opinion. Because I've had instances in my own life where kids are like, I don't like what you're... Okay.
We're gonna interrupt that because we have a caller. Wait, the caller went away. No! Oh, I got so excited there. I guess continue what you were saying.
I gotta get back on track. So
Peer pressure.
So
Peer pressure.
yeah, that peer pressure shouldn't be targeted to like someone's opinion, because it's happened to me before where kids, like, some of my friends are like, I don't like what you're thinking. Don't think that. And I'm like, I don't like where that's going. But I feel that I'm a broken record right here, but like the peer pressure is good to like motivate your friends to go out and vote, but you shouldn't, like, I was raised with this, you shouldn't be asking them who you voted for. You shouldn't be trying to like shove their opinion like in your friend's mouth, so to say.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I guess then going to a bigger scale, what about celebrities? Can you see celebrities, they'll tweet and say, I just voted, or they're very vocal on Twitter, I know.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So it's that I feel celebrities are kind of a dicey way of thinking because they're kind of, I don't know, they're influencers, and influencers can be a good thing and a bad thing. So when it comes to voting, do you think what should celebrities, like, how should we go about that?
I don't think I'd be naive enough to just say that these people were just saying, "Oh, I voted for this person." You should know that information.
You should
instead
vote
of
for them
trying
too.
to, instead of like you said, instead of trying to influence another demographic into following them. But like we said earlier, I don't think you should blindly follow someone who's, albeit maybe important to you or someone that you respect, but yet again, it's completely subjective.
And like tracking back to when we were talking about like what's the politics angle at this. So celebrities who might either be friends with some politicians or like support their views, they might be trying to like pressure their like large amount of followers into that kind of sense of like, you like my music or you like my movies, you should like my politics too. It's, you kind of have to look at like what their tweets and their Instagram posts and saying, is this something I should be listening to, or should I like go on my own way and think about like what I want to support?
Yeah, I feel you also shouldn't get your news from celebrities
No.
too. I mean, let alone who you should vote for. They're not news sources. They don't know what they're talking about half the time, and so I don't know. I feel it's just a dicey topic to talk about.
It's another dicey question.
So if you want to voice your opinion, I know we just lost a caller, but call in. We got about, I'd say 19 minutes left in the show. Our number is 978-540-2487. It's a controversial topic, and it can be brought to Littleton. I mean, Somerville and Concord, they're kind of thinking about doing it. So, give us a call.
So, like I said, with the influencers, it's easy to be blinded by personal bias, or at least liking someone's own artist to be just almost brought into their views without even realizing it. That's perhaps the reason you'd be moving into those views instead of being, I agree with this, as in I agree with this person, therefore I follow their agenda.
Yeah, and then the celebrities are very influential, especially on younger audiences of Michael and I's age. So if they're smart enough to think, okay, I have about a couple 100,000 16-year-olds listening to my music, bam, I put in some either personal opinions or controversial topics that I give my opinion on, then maybe they'll agree with me. So it's kind of, well, are the kids mature enough to decide their own opinion, or are they going to follow blindly to the...
All right, we got a caller. Hi, Jane. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. If you have a question, a comment, a concern, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks for taking my call. And my question, I've been watching the show and listening to you guys debate whether we should or shouldn't lower the voting age, but really not knowing the motivation behind that legislator's movement to lower the age. In your research, what was her motivation or reasoning for lowering the age? I'd be interested to see how she's trying to sell that, because clearly even two young people are saying, I'm not so sure that's the right thing to do. So what was that Mrs. Presley trying to, what was her reasoning or position on wanting to lower the age?
Yeah, so she did a little interview with Wicked Local Somerville, and she was saying, these young kids are activists and they're becoming more vocal in their government, so they should have a voice in their government because they are getting more politically active compared to the younger generation. So I think that's what her angle was trying to get at, that we should let our younger generation be able to vote so they can voice their opinion because they're getting more vocal. That's what I read from it, but I don't know, she might have a different motive, or she's just trying to appeal to a younger generation, be the cool politician.
The cool mama
Well,
politics.
and you can't get inside her head to know what she was thinking, and I didn't watch the interview or read the article that you did, but what it makes me think is she's appealing to a younger generation to garner more votes for herself and maybe candidates of like mind, so that, there's this whole thought out there with young people, like, well, if I vote for this candidate, everything's going to be free, because kids don't understand that you need to pay taxes, and that's how things, get funded. And so I think sometimes it's maybe appealing to a less mature brain who hasn't paid taxes or isn't out in the world working yet to understand how things, are funded. And so I think it's almost, I don't know, I wonder about her motivation, and I think people will jump on that bandwagon because it's like, oh, here's a whole untapped pool of voters who pretty much are going to believe what I tell them because they don't have 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of life experience to tell them different. So just my 2 cents.
Well, thank you so much for calling in. You were very insightful.
All right, thanks for taking my call. Have a good night.
You too. So, how'd you like to respond to that?
Very well said, personally.
Thank you, Jane.
Absolutely.
There's
Sorry, we had a
she
crew
brought
member.
up a good talking point, because going back again to the politicians, what's their motive? We don't know why the congresswoman suddenly brought this up. Is she really thinking this is a good opportunity for kids, that there's so many activists, or is she trying to play her own angle? And something that kind of annoys me about all these activists, it's good to have activists. We like them sometimes.
It's actually more I like seeing people vocal
Yes.
in government, because it's just, they're actually voicing their opinion instead of just being grr, this person did this,
And then not
being
doing
very
anything
passive
about
about it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But again, those activists that you always see on social media, you see them posting all these things on their Instagram story, or in their posts or their tweets or their Snapchats, and you see them saying these things, and then you don't see them doing anything about it. So that just annoys me, because if you really believe strongly in a topic, shouldn't you be out there trying to make that change instead of leaving it in the hands of Instagram? Because that's not going to get you anywhere.
So would voting give them that opportunity for change? I mean, it's kind of given them that, here's an opportunity to voice your opinion. I mean, representatives are only going to look at so much because they have they have so many different advocate groups that they have to tend to, and lobbyists who come and see them for their needs. So it's just the politicians they have certain groups that they look at, and would voting be that outlet for those activists?
Well, if it's the activists who really want to make a change,
Hold that thought. We got another caller. Hi, George. How are you?
Good. Good show.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much.
I have a question now. What criteria are you going to be using to formulate your opinions to vote? I happen to be an older person. I'm an independent, politically speaking, and I read multiple papers and read their opinions and different things like that. I watch different TV shows like Meet the Press and other TV shows to help formulate my opinions. I listen to both sides of the argument.
Which I applaud you for.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you listening to anything in particular outside of the home, or
Are you talking
Okay,
about
please.
particular sources that either the panel is talking about or that I've seen, or is that what you're asking about?
how do you formulate your opinions? Basically, is my basic question. On who you're going to vote for.
So I kind of feel like it then, again, like George, you were talking about, it goes back to those news sources, because if kids only turn on one TV station, they're only going to get that one view. So it's really good for them to hop around and read different articles, different newspapers, different news outlets, and see what they agree with, because you can hear both sides of the story from either two separate news stations and still be confused. So you really need to go around the bush and just see, I'm sorry, that was a weird phrase, but you really need to go out and like look at all of the facts so you can formulate a sturdy and strong, valid opinion.
It's very easy to be almost moved by only one side of an argument when in reality, like you said earlier, and we applaud you for listening to all different sides of the argument and really making an objective factual opinion on.
I feel also that you might be getting your formulating your opinions from school, and maybe whether it's your peers or your instructors, that's also because you spend about 6 to 8 hours in school each day, and you're with those mindsets. So do you think that would also be how you formulate your opinions too, is from your peers and your mentors and your instructors?
Definitely.
Yes, I've seen that from a bunch of teachers. Like I had this one teacher last year who was very, very vocal about her opinions. And it made me uncomfortable, but some of the students were like all for it. They're like, yeah, that's awesome. But that's not healthy, listening to only one person, only one instructor. Like, it's always good to have different instructors and different teachers and looking at all different sources.
Yeah, and George, even though George left us, I first wanted to thank him for calling in on the show. I think when you're going to vote, it's interesting because, like we said before, I feel kids are very not closed-minded, but they're focusing on certain things of their life. And then once they get to this bigger portion, they have more things to think about. And George touched on with sources and if 16-year-olds are going to vote, you guys get your sources, your facts from multiple sources. Like, fingers crossed, like hopefully you do. But do you think 16-year-olds, politicians dole down the facts just so it's tangible and we can digest it as normal citizens? So do you think 16-year-olds are going to understand that higher up level of thought?
I would really hope so.
There's only so much we can grasp, though.
Absolutely. Like you said, not including all the information in order to get it to a more tangible level with all of us can sometimes leave out key information that we may not understand, but also may help, I suppose. Will help us.
Yeah, and I can read an article or rewatch an interview as many times as I can and still not understand a topic because I'm not my parents. I'm not an adult who's had multiple years of political experience, and it's just something that we need that maturity to understand because you need that experience along with the maturity. They go hand in hand.
Yeah. You are only 15 and 16. You've only had 15 or 16 years of experience, and like 3 or 4 years you don't even remember. So I feel you just need, you need that age and I feel maturity. That's the word of the day. Yeah, I think you just need that maturity in order to make those decisions because, I don't know about taxes that well. No one's really told me about that.
If you don't know about taxes, how are we going to know about taxes?
I know. I don't know. Have you guys filled out an income tax return form yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So I guess it's just, how do we trust you guys to vote if you don't know anything?
You can't
It's
really.
kind of like our first caller was touching on with the idea of sort of taxes, because the age of 16 is often an age where food, shelter, almost everything is provided to you by your parents.
Yes.
And without experience in the real world with all those things, it would be very hard to formulate some sort of opinion without knowing them firsthand.
Do you guys have any final words for anybody watching out there? We'll just start, should 16-year-olds be able to vote, and then you can go from there.
You could start this one.
All right then. Personally, I believe the idea of almost giving the younger generation younger part of our generation, a bit more power in our legislature words.
Yeah.
Would be a positive idea. However, with a lot of with lack of experience in the actual world and often a bit less experience with politics and government, all those sorts of things, it would be very difficult to get factual, straight opinions for all those things. So personally, I would be against moving the voting age to 16.
And I'm a 16-year-old, so I should be yeah, I want to vote. But no, myself, I don't believe I have that information and that capability, even that maturity, to go into a voting booth and know what I am committing to. And it all goes back into the experience, because sorry to say this, everyone, but I'm a horse person. And in the horse world, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it can be translated into the same kind of conversation, because without that experience that you don't have at 16, it's not an if situation, it's a when. Because when you're 18, you will have to eventually pay a mortgage, do taxes,
I'll pay rent.
pay rent, or unfortunately pay student loans. And you're not going to understand these decisions until you're actually in that scenario.
Yeah, so I guess experience and age and wisdom is a virtue in this case.
Absolutely.
Do you think at the municipal level, could Littleton experiment with that?
I would say so. It would be, like I said earlier, a good transitioning point into the world of getting more political experience.
The world of
voting, all those sorts. Personally, I'd be forward with it. However, like you said, with 4 elections, at this time, it would be a little soon to just force this on everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you guys would only be voting in one of them. Yeah.
And I like the idea of younger teens voting in municipal elections, but as I stated earlier, it's not going to work for every town. And if it doesn't work for one town, how can it work for all? Because then there's going to be those conversations. Well, it's not fair. You have all your kids voting for this, and ours can't do this. But I feel with time, if we explore this a little more, it's going to be an interesting talking point, and maybe eventually a turning point in the Littleton government.
Well, I guess, yeah. So good thoughts to end on. So thank you so much for watching Littleton Live. I want to thank our callers for being a part of the discussion tonight. Next week, August 21st, we will be discussing, do we need a senior center? Think about that and join us next week and give us your opinions on Littleton Live. I'm your host, Nicole Viagioni, wishing you a good evening, Littleton.